While most NFL players end up remaining upstanding members of society for a majority of their lives, a small minority have abused their fame and money to become criminals. A smaller minority have used their position to become involved in violent crime, and even smaller minority end up committing the ultimate crime of taking a life. There have been many infamous NFL criminals like Aaron Hernandez, O.J. Simpson, and Ray Caruth. One of the worst criminals in NFL history has gone relatively unspoken about, and that man is Phillip Adams. Phillip Adams played for 6 years in the NFL, and after retiring was the main perpetrator of an attack that took the lives of 6 people. Today I wanted to analyze the life of Phillip Adams and what exactly happened on that tragic night in April of 2021. Phillip Adams was born in July of 1988 in Rock Hill, South Carolina. He attended Rock Hill High School, where he quickly stood out as an incredibly talented cornerback, and that drew the attention of several college programs in the area. He ended up attending South Carolina State University, and for the first few years of his college careers, primarily a backup and on special team units. He managed to continue with his progress on the field, and by his junior year, he was 6th on the team in tackles and 1st in interceptions with 5 on the year. His senior year saw even further football improvement when he was selected to the MAC All-Conference team as a starter and had another 3 interceptions, one of which being a pick 6. While he had shown promise as a college player, he was not the belle of the ball when the draft rolled around. He was selected in the 7th round of the draft by the San Francisco 49ers. He had limited play in his first season and ended up breaking his ankle on the opening kickoff of week 16 of his rookie year. The 49ers decided to release him instead of waiting for him to come back from his injury, but the Patriots signed him off the free agent market after their 2 starting corners had been injured. He did record his first interception as a Patriot, but was released to make room for more proven players. From there, he had a rough roster spot on the Seahawks before settling in Oakland with the Raiders. He played in 15 games in 2012 and recorded an interception alongside 15 tackles. The next year, he appeared in all 16 games, but actually suffered from 2 concussions in a 3-game period. At the time, corner was a much more physical position, and with that came a string of head injuries that Phillip would cover up and try to hide in order to not lose his roster spot. After those injuries, the Raiders released him once again, and he bounced around to the Seahawks again, Jets, Falcons, and Colts before announcing that he was done with the game of football after 6 seasons of being a bubble roster spot player for several franchises, from 2015 to 2021. Like many NFL players before him, he had squandered most of the wealth he had earned from his career and had no clear career path. After a few years, he had moved back in with his parents and began to struggle with his mental health along with his physical health. His parents reported that he had become extremely socially isolated. He felt like not having a long NFL career had made him a failure of sorts, and he did not like social interaction. He also became increasingly paranoid, thinking that everyone was out to get him and talking trash behind his back. They also reported that he became almost bipolar in his mood, swinging from being elated to furious in seconds. Phillip said that due to his NFL playing days, he was suffering from mood swings, memory loss, and other symptoms consistent with CTE. While we are constantly learning more about it, most NFL players do not end up going on a rampage despite head injuries. CTE is not an excuse to become a monster, but it may explain more leading up to his actions. One thing about Adams was that he almost entirely refused to seek medical help for his mental state. He thought in his paranoia that doctors would just prescribe him medication he didn't want or label him with a mental illness. Whatever had occurred to Adams, football related or not, it all came to a head on April 7th of 2021. The morning of April 7th seemed uneventful. Adams, who had been living with his parents in a modest home near Rock Hill, showed no outward signs of what was to come. By all accounts, he kept to himself, struggling with symptoms of isolation, paranoia, and possibly untreated neurological issues. Around 4:45 p.m., Adams left his home, carrying firearms that would soon claim the lives of 6 innocent people. He hopped on his 4-wheeler and sped off. Adams drove to the home of Dr. Robert Leslie, a prominent and well-loved physician in the Rock Hill community. Dr. Leslie, 70, was known not only for his medical expertise, but also for his compassionate approach to patient care. He had been a fixture in the community for decades, serving as both a family doctor and the medical director of a local hospice. On this day, the Leslie home was a hub of normalcy, with Dr. Leslie, his wife Barbara, their 2 grandchildren Ada, 9, and Noah, 5 and 2 air conditioning technicians James Lewis and Robert Shook present on the property. Without warning, Adams entered the property and began his attack. His actions were precise and calculated, sparing no one present. Dr. Leslie and his wife were taken in their home, as were their 2 young grandchildren, who had been spending a quiet afternoon with their grandparents. Outside, Adams targeted the 2 HVAC technicians who had been working on the property. James Lewis died at the scene, while Robert Shook was critically wounded but managed to call for help before succumbing to his injuries later at a hospital. Law enforcement was alerted to the scene following a chilling 911 call from Robert Shook, who described the shooting before his injuries overwhelmed him. When deputies arrived at the Leslie home, they were met with a horrifying sight. Inside the residence, the bodies of Dr. Leslie, Barbara Leslie, and their grandchildren were discovered, while James Lewis was found outside near the air conditioning unit. Investigators quickly pieced together the devastating scope of the crime. The shooting sent shockwaves through the Rock Hill community. Dr. Leslie had been a beloved figure, and the loss of his family, particularly the 2 young grandchildren, was incomprehensible. News outlets nationwide quickly picked up the story, reporting on the baffling nature of the crime and the search for the suspect. As investigators worked the scene, they traced evidence that pointed to Phillip Adams as the perpetrator. Adams had reportedly been a patient of Dr. Leslie in the past, leading to speculation about a personal motive. However, no clear evidence of a dispute between Adams and the doctor ever emerged. Law enforcement officials later revealed that Adams's name came up quickly during the investigation, and deputies were dispatched to his parents' home that evening. When law enforcement arrived, Adams barricaded himself inside a room in his parents' house. His parents, who were unharmed, left the home at the deputies' request, leaving Adams alone inside. Despite attempts by the police to negotiate, Adams refused to surrender. Several hours later, law enforcement heard a single shot. When they entered the residence, they found Adams taken by his own hand. One of the most perplexing aspects of this tragedy was the lack of a clear motive. Adams's family and friends described him as a private and troubled individual in the years leading up to the shooting. His father, Alonzo Adams, told reporters that football had messed him up, pointing to the physical and mental toll of a career in the NFL. Adams had suffered multiple concussions during his playing days, along with a severe ankle injury. These injuries, coupled with his withdrawal from social interactions, suggested that Adams may have been dealing with chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a brain condition linked to repeated head trauma. Dr. Leslie's family confirmed that there was no known conflict between Adams and the doctor, deepening the mystery surrounding the crime. Some speculated that Adams's mental health issues, possibly exacerbated by CTE, could have played a role in his actions. However, without direct evidence, the exact reasons behind his decision to carry out the attack remain speculative. The Rock Hill event left a trail of grief and unanswered questions. The Leslie family mourned the loss of their patriarch, matriarch, and 2 young children, whose lives were cut tragically short. The families of James Lewis and Robert Shook also faced unimaginable loss, grappling with the senseless nature of the crime. Meanwhile, Adams's own family struggled to reconcile the person they knew with the violent actions he had committed. The tragedy also reignited discussions about the mental health challenges faced by retired NFL players. Adams's behavior in the years following his retirement, including increasing paranoia and isolation, aligned with symptoms of CTE. After his death, his brain was examined, and doctors confirmed he suffered from an advanced stage of CTE. The diagnosis added Adams's name to the list of former NFL players whose mental health was severely impacted by repeated head trauma. His advanced stage of CTE, described as unusually severe for someone his age, likely contributed to his declining mental state and violent actions. Experts noted that the disease could explain the drastic behavioral changes Adams exhibited in the years leading up to the shooting, including his inability to seek help or manage his deteriorating condition. The Rock Hill shooting also raised questions about how the NFL and society at large support players after retirement. While the league has taken steps to address player safety and post-career mental health resources, cases like Adams's highlight the gaps that still exist. For many players, the transition from the high-intensity world of professional sports to civilian life is fraught with challenges, particularly when compounded by the long-term effects of injuries sustained during their careers. No matter his reasoning, there was absolutely no reason so many innocent people needed to be taken from their families early. No amount of concussions justify the type of behavior exhibited on that day. It truly was a tragedy of epic proportions, and nothing will ever make the loss to the families whole. The actions of Phillip Adams are absolutely inexcusable, and I am surprised I hadn't heard more about this before doing the research into it. I understand the game of football can do a number on one's brain, but so many NFL players do not commit commit similar actions. Hopefully this video helps bring some awareness to the actions of that day. I really do hope the families one day find a way to find peace. Thank you for watching. We make videos like this 3 times a week.